Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Before we wander too far into this magical night, let me invite you to gently close your eyes or soften your gaze if you're not quite ready for sleep, and allow your thoughts to drift. If you enjoy these slow tales from the wizarding world, feel free to like, subscribe, and join us again for another bedtime adventure under starlit skies. Tonight's tale is a hushed one, a secret tucked not just behind locked doors or under invisibility cloaks, but behind Hermione Granger's clever silence, and within a place even the Marauder's map might have overlooked. Our story takes us not into the bustling corridors of Hogwarts filled with chatter and charms, but into the quiet spaces between pages, into a library within a library, where the air is thick with forgotten enchantments and the scent of old parchment is stronger than any potion. Let us return now to Hogwarts, not the thunderous Great Hall, nor the mischief of Gryffindor Tower. No, this time we begin near the upper levels of the castle, where lanterns float sleepily beside stone staircases, and even the portraits are yawning with dreams in their frames. The evening has settled gently over the school. Outside the windows, a soft layer of must clings to the black lake, its surface undisturbed except for the gliding of a single, sleepy thestral in the distance. The stars are cloaked behind a veil of cloud, but the moon glows faintly, like a promise waiting to be unwrapped. Inside, the castle breathes in stillness. The only sounds are the creaks of age-old wood and the faraway flutter of an owl's wings. Warm light spills from a few scattered torches, flickering along the hallway just beside the library's entrance. It is late. Most students are tucked in bed, drifting into dreams of broomsticks and Bertie Bott's beans. But not Hermione, not tonight. Beneath the main library, in a place even Madame Pince does not fully remember, lies a chamber long forgotten. A space neither labeled nor locked, but left to fade with time, buried beneath layers of spells older than the founders themselves. It is not on any official floor plan. It was never taught in class. And yet, someone like Hermione Granger would always find her way to such places. This is where our story begins. With one flickering candle, a curious hush, and a book whose cover should never have been opened. But worry not, dear listener, there is no danger here, only wonder, mystery, and a gentle, magical thread to follow, like a golden string through a dream. So rest easy, let the castle guide you now, slowly, tenderly, and allow the pages of this tale to unfold like soft petals in your sleep. Let us begin. Not long after the war was won, and the dust of battle had settled into the cracks of the ancient stones of Hogwarts, Hermione Granger returned, not as a student, not as a soldier of a cause, but as a seeker of quiet purpose. Gone were the urgent days of chasing Horcruxes, of arguing with Ron in tents, or outwitting Death Eaters. Now there was time to think, to reflect, and to read. Oh yes, to read without fear of interruption. To open books not for answers, but for questions no one had dared ask. Hermione had taken up a quiet research position under Professor McGonagall's blessing. She lived in a modest corner room high in Ravenclaw Tower, though she was Gryffindor through and through. The view overlooked the forbidden forest, and her window always smelled faintly of pine and parchment. It was the perfect place for a mind that never truly stopped spinning. Every day, she spent hours cataloging ancient tomes the ministry had recovered from lost vaults, cursed libraries, and dismantled dark archives. It was quiet work, humble, but to Hermione, each book held a possibility, an unopened door. She kept her circles small. Ron, now working with George at the joke shop, would visit when he could, bringing laughter and odd magical sweets that buzzed around her study. Harry, working long hours as an Auror, often arrived tired but smiling, always placing a warm hand on her shoulder like a shared understanding. But this story isn't about them. This story is hers. It is about the girl who once carried a beaded bag filled with everything you might need to survive a war, and now carried in her quiet heart the weight of questions left behind. You see, Hermione had always trusted books. But what happens when a book itself is the mystery? One evening, while sorting through an unusually dusty batch of unlabeled grimoires, she found a single volume wrapped in what looked like woven ivy. Its spine bore no title, no author, and when she touched it, she swore, only just, that it pulsed once beneath her fingertips like something alive. She didn't speak of it to anyone, not even Harry. Instead, she began reading it slowly, just a few pages a night. Not because she feared it, but because something told her it was reading her too. As days passed, Hermione's walks grew longer, her questions more peculiar, and her dreams, well, her dreams grew vivid. In them, she wandered libraries that seemed to stretch beyond space, their shelves spinning like clocks. She heard whispers not of warning, but of invitation. And so, with a candle and quiet curiosity, Hermione took the book deeper into the castle, past the known corners, past the public halls, until finally she reached the stairs that led downward into what would become her secret. A library not even Dumbledore had spoken of, not in any memory she'd read, and she was not alone. But we'll come to that. For now, let's follow her down the stairs, step by careful step. The steps spiraled downward in narrowing turns, and with each step Hermione took, the temperature dropped ever so slightly. It wasn't unpleasant. Rather, it carried the kind of chill that one associates with old stone, forgotten places, and memories that have long since settled into silence. She held her wand aloft, casting a faint lumos that shimmered gently along the curved walls. The stones bore no moss, no grime. In fact, they seemed impossibly clean, as if time had passed differently here, or not at all. Hermione had not meant to descend this far. Earlier that evening, she had followed the ivy-wrapped book's whisper, a pull more than a voice. After reading a short passage, the words had rearranged themselves into an unfamiliar symbol. A soft glow had spread across the parchment, illuminating a page that hadn't been visible before. At the bottom was a phrase she couldn't translate, yet somehow understood. Below the ink lies what was never written. Intrigued, she returned to the corridor where the room of requirement once stood. But the magic had shifted. Instead, the wall beside it shimmered faintly under her touch, just once, then slowly parted to reveal this winding staircase. And now here she was, deeper than the dungeons, deeper than the Slytherin common room, deeper, she suspected, than even the Chamber of Secrets. Finally, the stairway ended in a small arched doorway. No lock, no symbol, just smooth, untouched stone. Hermione reached out and placed her palm against it. It opened silently. She gasped, not in fear, but in astonishment. Before her lay a vast circular chamber, wider than the Great Hall and far taller. The ceiling was so high it faded into darkness. Along every inch of the stone walls, shelves curved upward in a perfect spiral, stacked with books so old they seemed to shimmer faintly under her wand's light, like they remembered candlelight long gone. And in the center was nothing. A single, flat circle of smooth stone, untouched by dust or time. Around it, 8 thin columns reached upward, almost delicate in their structure, each carved with a different creature: phoenix, dragon, thestral, centaur, hippocampus, basilisk, acromantula, and a creature she couldn't identify. Serpent-like, yes, but ethereal, almost shifting. Hermione took one slow step into the chamber. The moment her foot touched the center stone, every shelf lit up, not brightly, but in a subtle, glowing shimmer, not from torches, but from the books themselves. Each spine glowed with a color unique to its contents: soft blues, warm golds, forest greens. It was not a blinding light. It was a welcome. She whispered under her breath, "Is this another library?" Her voice didn't echo. Instead, it seemed to dissolve into the space itself, as if the room absorbed it kindly. A quiet hum filled the air. Then, a book moved, just one. It slid gently from the shelf above her head and drifted downward, not falling, but floating, until it came to rest in midair, waiting. Hermione stepped closer, heart pounding with curiosity. The book was bound in deep blue leather, and its cover bore an emblem of interwoven moons. She reached out. The moment her fingers touched it, the chamber seemed to breathe. A low wind moved through the shelves. The columns vibrated slightly, resonating like the inside of a giant bell, and the air around her shimmered as though a spell had been activated. The book opened of its own accord. Pages fluttered rapidly before settling on a single parchment. No ink, just a blank page. Hermione frowned, leaned closer, and whispered, "Reveal." At once, words appeared, not in black, but in silver. They formed in a slow, elegant script. To the one who seeks what was not taught, know that some knowledge buries itself not in fear, but in mercy. The letters glowed faintly, then faded. A new line emerged. Begin only when you are ready to remember what never happened. And with that, the book burst, softly, into mist. Hermione gasped as the mist spiraled upward, circling her once, twice, 3 times. Her wand's light dimmed, flickered, and then brightened with a soft golden hue she hadn't cast herself. And in that moment, the world shifted. She wasn't standing in the stone chamber anymore. She was seated at a desk, a classroom, but not one she recognized. Sunlight streamed through diamond-shaped panes. The walls were lined with books, yes, but none bore titles. The teacher at the front was neither young nor old and wore no house robes. Their face shimmered slightly, as if not fully real, as if remembered. Other students sat beside her, but they weren't students of her time. Their clothes were older, their wands shorter. The girl next to her had a wand made of ash wood, wrapped in copper thread. Yet Hermione understood something deep. This was Hogwarts, but not as she knew it. It was Hogwarts from long, long ago, a time when the founders still walked the halls. A voice echoed gently around her, not from the teacher, but from somewhere older. "Welcome to the class of unspoken lore," Hermione's breath caught. This class once existed, then it was erased, not because it was dangerous, but because the world wasn't ready for it. The classroom faded. The bookshelves returned. She was back in the chamber, but the book was gone, yet something had changed. The stone circle at her feet was glowing with faint runes now, ones she hadn't seen before. One by one, they lit up in a spiral, drawing her attention to the farthest shelf on the right. A space had opened where there had been no gap before. A corridor, narrow, dark, and at its entrance a word now shimmered in silver ink: "Continue." Hermione steadied herself. She looked over her shoulder, though she knew no one had followed her. Then she adjusted her cloak, held her wand high once more, and stepped forward. Whatever lay beyond, it wasn't merely a hidden library. It was something older, something that remembered Hogwarts before Hogwarts remembered itself. And as she walked, she realized the book had not disappeared. It had gone within her, its memory now part of her magic. The corridor whispered faintly with every step, a soft murmur of voices long silenced, and deep within, Hermione Granger did not feel afraid. She felt invited. The corridor beyond the glowing rune was narrow and seemingly endless. Its stone floor was worn smooth by footsteps too ancient to remember, and yet the air was untouched by dust or time. A subtle hum resonated through the walls, not unpleasant, but curiously alive, like the corridor itself was watching, waiting. Hermione walked slowly, wand held out, the light from her lumos casting golden warmth across old stone. Gay echoed softly, swallowed gently by the corridor's listening silence. The runes on the floor behind her faded one by one, as if the path was sealing itself once passed, not to trap, but to preserve the sacredness of the journey forward. At last, the narrow hallway opened into another chamber, smaller than the vast circular library before it, but no less magical. This room was round and modest, with a single high-backed chair at its center, carved from polished wood and inlaid with gently glowing sigils. It faced a wide stone wall that looked at first glance entirely plain. But as Hermione approached, the wall rippled, as if responding to her presence. Shimmering silver lines emerged like threads being pulled through fabric. The lines crisscrossed and curved until they formed a vast, intricate tapestry, not of cloth, but of light and memory. Scenes began to flicker and play across the wall's surface, moments not from her life, but from Hogwarts' past. She saw a version of the Great Hall with just 4 long tables, and 4 people standing behind them. The founders, Godric Gryffindor, fierce-eyed and golden-robed, Helga Hufflepuff, kind-eyed and steady, Rowena Ravenclaw, sharp and elegant, her wand like a sliver of frost, and Salazar Slytherin, brooding, his gaze flicking not at the others, but at something, someone unseen, but the image shifted. It showed a classroom again, the same as before, the class of unspoken lore. This time, however, the view was from the teacher's desk. Dozens of students sat in the room, listening as the teacher raised a shimmering object, a book wrapped not in leather, but in what looked like woven light. It pulsed, as if it were breathing. The echoes of magic, the teacher spoke, though no mouth moved. The words came from the tapestry itself. These are spells not born from incantations or wand work, but from memory, emotion, and resonance. Magic that responds not to commands, but to the soul. Hermione's heart thudded gently, not in fear, but in reverent awe. Suddenly, the wall shimmered once more, and this time a single word floated forward from the tapestry and hung in the air between her and the chair. Remember. The room darkened. The chair began to glow faintly, not from light, but from within, as though it held memories waiting to be released. Hermione, cautiously, sat down, and as soon as she did, she was no longer in the room. She was standing in the forbidden forest. But the sky was a different shade, mottled purple and orange, neither day nor night. The trees swayed gently, though there was no wind, and the forest whispered with a voice that was not quite human. She who remembers what never was, now sees what still lingers. She turned. Behind her stood a familiar figure, Luna Lovegood. But Luna was older here. Her hair was longer, her gaze softer, and she wore a cloak Hermione had never seen before, one embroidered with runes Hermione couldn't decipher. "You're not real," Hermione whispered. Luna smiled. "No, I'm remembered. There's a difference." The forest shimmered again. Now she saw books, dozens of them, floating gently between the trees. Some opened midair, pages fluttering without wind. Others rested on mossy stones, their covers closed but humming softly, with a sound like the beating of tiny wings. These books, Luna, or the memory of Luna, said, are the ones Hogwarts forgot. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were too powerful to be understood at the time. "But why now?" Hermione asked. "Why show me this?" Luna smiled again, stepping aside. "Because something has changed. Magic has shifted. Hogwarts is remembering itself, and it chose you." The forest darkened slightly. One book floated toward Hermione, its cover glowing with deep emerald light. "This one," Luna said, "is not meant to be read. It's meant to be heard." Hermione reached out. As her fingers brushed the cover, a soft melody filled the air, notes without instruments, voices without singers, a lullaby made of memory, and with it came words, not written, but spoken into her mind. When the walls were first built, they were not stone, but silence. When the lessons were first taught, they were not spells, but stories. Magic is not just a force, it is a witness, and it remembers everything. Suddenly, she was back in the chair. The tapestry had gone still, but in her hand was a single page, real this time. It read, "To read the next book, you must write it first, not with ink, but with memory." She looked around. The stone wall now had a niche, an alcove, empty, and beside it, a quill floated, no inkpot, no scroll, just the quill, waiting. Hermione stood slowly, heart warm and curious. She understood. This library did not just hold books, it held echoes, and to unlock them, she needed to offer one of her own. She reached out and took the quill. It felt oddly weightless, and then, in her own mind, she began to write, not with her hand, but with her heart. She remembered the first time she boarded the Hogwarts Express, the rush of steam, the chill of nerves meeting Harry and Ron, her fear during the troll attack, and the warmth of their friendship afterward. She remembered Dumbledore's eyes, McGonagall's stern kindness, the way the common room smelled during winter, the times she cried, the times she failed, the times she stood tall, wand shaking, but heart steady. And the quill moved all on its own, writing words that shone gold on invisible parchment. And then a new book appeared. It floated gently down from the air, its cover blank. Hermione took it with both hands, and the cover changed. It now bore her name. The memory of Hermione Granger, first reader of the unspoken lore. She held it to her chest. The room sighed with a soft breeze. The wall faded, the chair dimmed, and a door appeared behind her, arched, wood-paneled, lit by warm torchlight. A return. Hermione looked back once. The chamber glowed with silent approval, and as she stepped through the door, back toward the known corridors of Hogwarts, she knew the library wasn't finished, and neither was she. The corridors of Hogwarts felt subtly different after that night. Nothing visible to the eye, but the castle's presence was more aware, more watchful. As Hermione walked its familiar halls, the walls seemed to lean in ever so slightly, as though they remembered her steps through the hidden chamber and now regarded her with a quiet respect. It wasn't unnerving, but rather like returning to an old friend who had waited for years to tell their story. After the night in the secret library, Hermione found herself reflecting often on the words etched into the page she now kept folded neatly in her robes. To read the next book, you must write it first. Not with ink, but with memory. The new book, her book, rested beside her bed in the small staff quarters she had been assigned since returning to Hogwarts in a part-time mentoring role. Unlike other books in the castle, it didn't gather dust or fade with age. Instead, each morning, it shimmered faintly, as if absorbing the dreams she had in the night. And some mornings, when she turned its cover open, there were new pages, written not in her handwriting, but in something older, something soft and silvery, like thought turned into script. One morning, a new page awaited her. Begin with the ones you trust. Hermione wasn't entirely sure what it meant, but over the next few days, she found herself drawn to her dearest friends, starting, of course, with Harry and Ron. It had been several years since the war, and though they'd all gone in different directions, they still found comfort in each other's company. Harry now worked quietly in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, focusing more on reform than enforcement. Ron had taken up part ownership of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, but his heart still pulled him back to things that felt real: people, memories, and stories. They met in the Three Broomsticks one calm evening, the pub softly lit by floating candles and its windows fogged gently by the autumn chill. Outside, Hogsmeade was winding down, the last of the shops closing, the lanterns casting long shadows on cobblestones. Hermione told them about the secret library. She didn't reveal everything, not the full tapestry, not Luna's voice in the forest of memory, not even the page that spoke directly to her. But she told them enough for Harry's eyes to narrow thoughtfully and Ron's to widen with curiosity rather than fear. "Books that write themselves," Ron said slowly, sipping his butterbeer. "Sounds like something Fred and George would have invented if they'd had the patience." "It's different," Hermione said softly. "They aren't just books. They're echoes, traces of magic that didn't vanish, magic that wasn't supposed to last, but did." Waiting to be remembered, Harry leaned forward. "And the book you found, it wants more than just to be read." She nodded. "It wants me to remember, not just my memories, but those of the people Hogwarts trusts." Harry didn't speak for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Do you think it's choosing you, or do you think Hogwarts is choosing us again?" There was something gentle in the way he said it, something reverent, like they were being invited not just to uncover something, but to honor it. That night, Hermione returned to her room with a small bundle of parchment, notes Harry had scribbled over the years, thoughts he'd jotted down about moments that lingered, encounters, feelings, glimpses of things unspoken. She opened the memory book and slipped the pages inside. Nothing happened, not at first, but as she lay down, drifting toward sleep, she heard it again, the hum, faint and low, like a heartbeat buried in stone, and the book glowed softly on her bedside table. The next morning, new pages had been added. They told a story, one Harry had never written down. A moment during the Battle of Hogwarts when he'd paused, just briefly, in a forgotten corridor. A broken mirror, a flash of a girl's reflection, not real, but echoing a past fear. The story wasn't dramatic. It didn't change the course of the war, but it had stayed with him, and now, somehow, the library had captured it. Hermione's hands trembled slightly as she turned the page. The book was alive with memory, and it was asking for more. The next weeks passed in soft waves. Hermione spent her evenings in quiet corners of the castle, often joined by Harry or Ron, or even Ginny and Neville when they were free. They would talk about childhood mischief, about professors, about the secrets of the castle that no marauder's map had ever shown. Sometimes they didn't even need to write anything down. Just sharing a memory aloud near the memory book seemed to invite it in. The book grew heavier, but never burdensome. Each new entry shimmered with a tone, a warmth, a whisper of something lost but now remembered. One entry told of a room Neville had once found, filled with plants no herbology textbook had ever mentioned. They glowed with soft moonlight, and when he sang, poorly, they leaned in closer, as if listening. That room had vanished after the war, but the book remembered it now. Another page came from Ginny, a moment of fear during her first year, after the diary was destroyed, when she had stood in the common room alone, afraid to close her eyes. The page didn't judge, it simply held her memory, gently, like a song. One evening, as a mist settled around the castle, Hermione walked alone toward the astronomy tower. The castle was quiet, too quiet perhaps, but she liked it that way. The mist turned the torches into halos, and the portraits along the walls were dozing, their frames wrapped in slumber. When she reached the top of the tower, she saw something unexpected. A book, floating, not hers. This one was smaller, older, bound in deep green leather, its spine marked with runes she had seen before. In the secret library, it hovered just beyond reach. As she stepped forward, the air changed, cool and sharp, like the moment before a storm. A voice, not loud, not harsh, but unmistakably ancient, filled the space around her. One who carries others' memories must also guard her own. The floating book opened, its pages turned wildly, and then, just for a moment, Hermione saw a glimpse of something she hadn't expected: her parents. In Australia, their names changed, their memories erased. The moment she'd done it, the spell she cast to protect them, it was the one memory she rarely revisited, too painful, too full of choice and loss. But the book didn't judge. It held the memory gently, and then the pages stilled. One word appeared: welcome. The book lowered into her hands. She held it close, and something in her heart unfolded. The memory was no longer hers alone. It had been seen, and somehow, in being seen, it had softened. Hermione returned to her quarters and placed the new book beside the memory book. It shimmered once, and then both books merged, pages weaving into one another like threads in a tapestry. She didn't understand it fully, but she knew this: the library was growing, not just in size, but in trust. It was asking her to gather what Hogwarts had forgotten, not because it was dangerous, but because it was precious. The following days drifted by like mist over the Black Lake, quiet, steady, and filled with thoughtful moments. Hermione began to realize the memory book was no longer just a place where the past was recorded. It was becoming a place where the forgotten gently woke again, not with fanfare or noise, but with the soft unfolding of pages. Each evening, after her mentoring sessions with younger Hogwarts students were finished and the castle had dimmed its lights to welcome sleep, Hermione would return to her cozy quarters, tucked behind an ivy-covered wall near the library's western side. There, her fireplace glowed gently, not crackling too loud, and the memory book awaited her on a stand of carved ash wood, always opened to a page that hadn't been there the night before. Sometimes, the page would glow faintly, never too bright, just enough to guide her eyes to what needed reading. Tonight, however, the book was silent, closed, waiting. Hermione rested her hands on its cover and whispered, "Who next?" The answer didn't come as words. Instead, a faint warmth passed through the soles of her feet, an invitation. She stood, slowly, instinctively following the quiet pull through the halls of Hogwarts. The castle, ever watchful, made way for her steps. Portraits snoozed. The stairs didn't shift tonight. It was as though the castle wanted her to reach where she was going, and that place, as she soon discovered, was not the hidden library, but the room of requirement. She had not set foot there since the war. As she stood before the blank stretch of wall on the 7th floor, her thoughts stirred gently. A place to hold what the heart cannot forget, she thought. The wall shimmered, and the door appeared. The room was unlike how she remembered it. Gone were the towering stacks of hidden objects. Gone was the chaos. Tonight, it was quiet. A simple, circular chamber with tall windows that looked out upon a peaceful, unreal sky, soft lilac clouds drifting slowly through deep blue twilight. Bookshelves lined the walls, but not with ordinary books. Each one had no title, no author, just soft, warm-colored bindings and a feeling. Hermione stepped in, and the door closed behind her with the quiet finality of trust. In the center of the room stood a long wooden table, and seated at the far end was Neville. He looked up with a gentle smile. "I had a dream I'd find you here." Hermione blinked. "You too?" He nodded. "Something told me. This place remembers who we were and who we still might be." He motioned to the chair beside him. Laid out on the table were small potted plants, no bigger than teacups, glowing faintly in hues of blue, pink, and green. Neville gestured to one with star-shaped leaves. "Moonshade vine. I found it in a dream once. Thought I'd lost it, but here it is. Growing again." Hermione reached for one of the plants, its petals soft and cool. Neville's voice was calm. "I think this room is showing us the things we didn't know we kept." She nodded, eyes wide. "Memories not just in words, but in feeling." He smiled. "Exactly. I think that's why you're here. You're the only one who can listen properly." Hermione felt her heart swell, not with pressure, but with purpose. The library wasn't just a place of books. It was a keeper of echoes. Over the next several days, Hermione began gently inviting others, not many, just those whose hearts beat with the rhythm of Hogwarts. Luna arrived, of course, having sensed the shifting magic from her cottage beyond the Forbidden Forest. She entered the room of requirement barefoot, holding a teacup that sang softly. "Some memories don't want to be written," she said, gazing around the room. "They want to be felt." And so they were. Luna, Neville, Harry, and Ginny each came in quiet moments, not as visitors, but as returning pieces of a puzzle the castle had been patiently guarding, and Hermione, ever the steady soul among them, became their gentle guide. Together, they brought objects, a scarf that had once belonged to Colin Creevey, still faintly smelling of ink and warm afternoons, a cracked gobstone from Ron's first year, a small paper star from the Yule Ball decorations. And with each item, the library responded. Books opened themselves, pages formed, and Hermione made a choice. She would no longer keep the memory book hidden in her room. She placed it within the room of requirement, upon a pedestal of worn stone, where anyone trusted by Hogwarts could approach, read, and offer their memories in turn. One evening, as dusk deepened into night, Hermione remained in the chamber after the others had left. The room, always alive, seemed to hum quietly, as if offering its approval. She approached the memory book and found a new page written in that same silvery ink. When memory is shared, it becomes lighter, When it is trusted, it becomes timeless. She closed her eyes. In the stillness, the heartbeat of Hogwarts echoed softly through the walls. It wasn't loud, it wasn't proud, it was constant, and now she understood the library was never about uncovering secrets or solving puzzles. It was about remembering together, gently, safely, forever. It was just after midnight when the castle began to whisper again. Hermione stood alone in the room of requirement, the silver-flecked memory book closed before her. A candle burned low on the desk nearby, its flame flickering in gentle rhythm, as though breathing with the very walls of Hogwarts. She had grown used to the room's shifts, the way it softened when Neville arrived, the way it sparkled when Luna hummed. But tonight, there was a stillness, not cold or foreboding, just quiet, as though it were holding its breath. And then, from beneath the pedestal, something stirred, not with motion, but with magic. A hidden drawer, unseen, untouched for what must have been centuries, gently opened, revealing a slim, black-bound book wrapped in velvet. Hermione froze. The velvet shimmered faintly, with protective runes that glowed in a language she didn't know, ancient, elegant, deeply woven with enchantment. She approached carefully, her fingers brushing the cover with a reverence only she could offer. The moment her skin touched it, a rush of warmth traveled up her arm. Not painful, not overwhelming, just familiar. As though the book knew her, had waited for her, she sat slowly, breath steady, and opened it. Inside was no ordinary ink. The pages shimmered in silver and starlight, and as her eyes moved across the first lines, the words began to rearrange, like dew sliding across glass, until they formed sentences she could read. This book belongs to Rowena Ravenclaw. Hermione's breath caught. She whispered, "No." But the pages kept turning on their own, slowly, as if guided by the castle itself. They revealed a series of entries, reflections, spells, and letters from Ravenclaw's own hand, written not as declarations of power, but as gentle ponderings. Magic is not only in what is spoken, but in what is remembered. The stories we do not tell are the ones that shape the world. Each page carried fragments of Rowena's wisdom, scribbled not for fame or legacy, but to preserve quiet truths about pain, about love, about loss, about hope. And then Hermione reached the center of the book. The ink stilled, the room dimmed, and slowly, shimmering in air before her, an image appeared, faint and translucent like morning fog. A young Rowena, not the fierce witch of statues and legends, but a softer figure, seated at a windowsill, holding a book close to her chest. She began to speak, not aloud, but into Hermione's mind, her voice calm as the night breeze. "You found what others feared to remember." This library was never meant to be a secret of power. It was meant to hold what the world forgets in its haste to move on. The misfits, the almosts, the kindnesses that never made the history books. Hermione's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of recognition. She understood now all the unnamed books, all the memories whispered into the room. They weren't secrets in the way the world defined them. They were fragments of love, of longing, of quiet magic too gentle to survive in loud times. And the memory book, it had been calling her because it knew she wouldn't forget. Because her magic wasn't just about spells, it was about care. Rowena continued, "You have kept the castle's heart beating. With your quiet steps, with your choice to listen." The vision faded gently, like candle smoke in morning light, and Hermione was left in stillness, but not alone. Outside, the first rays of dawn were brushing the towers of Hogwarts in soft hues of gold and blue. Inside the room, the memory book began to glow, not brightly, but enough to reveal that its cover had changed. It no longer bore blank pages. It now read, "The Library of Gentle Magic." Below it, a new inscription had appeared, curated by Hermione Granger, Keeper of the Forgotten, Listener of the Quiet. Tears slipped down her cheeks, unashamed. She didn't need applause. She didn't need the Daily Prophet to write about it. This moment, this understanding, was enough. Later that morning, she found herself walking to the library, not for research, but with a purpose that felt different than it ever had. She met Madame Pince in the main atrium, who, surprisingly, smiled and nodded, almost as if she already knew. Hermione placed the memory book gently on a low wooden table near a window where the morning sun pooled like melted gold. There was no sign, no announcement, only a simple handwritten note. If there is something in your heart that the world has forgotten, you may find it here or you may leave it here. Either way, it will be safe. The castle was calm again, and Hermione, for the first time in many months, sat down without needing to solve or prove anything. She simply rested, and in her rest, she felt something magical that had nothing to do with spells. It was peace, the gentle kind, the rare kind, the kind you can only find when someone finally says, "I remember." The golden afternoon sun filtered through the high windows of the Hogwarts library, bathing the ancient stone and oak shelves in a soft, honeyed light. Dust motes drifted lazily in the warm beams, undisturbed by time or hurry. In a quiet corner where few students ever wandered, the memory book lay open on a small table beside the window. Its pages were still now, gently fluttering only when a breeze whispered past the curtains, as though the castle itself were exhaling in contentment. Hermione sat nearby in a deep armchair, a cup of chamomile tea nestled in her hands. The scent mingled with old parchment and polished wood, a perfume she had always associated with comfort, with home. No longer burdened by questions or the need to chase down the unknown, her thoughts floated gently, like a leaf on calm water. There was nothing urgent to solve, no danger to overcome, just the hush of Hogwarts in the lull of the afternoon and the gentle knowledge that something important had been remembered. She looked out the window, beyond the lake that shimmered like silver foil in the light. She could see Hagrid's hut in the distance, smoke curling from its crooked chimney. Everything was exactly where it should be, and yet something within her had shifted, not a change that others might see, but the kind of change that settles quietly in your bones, in your way of seeing the world, the kind of change that makes room for gentler magic. Behind her, The shelves of the library seemed to lean in ever so slightly, as if listening, as if grateful. Somewhere, high above in the rafters, a soft cooing of an owl echoed gently, adding to the peace. Neville had come by earlier, curious about the book, but respectful of its quiet. He hadn't asked questions. He had simply touched the edge of the table and smiled, as though he too could feel the warmth it held. Luna had left a tiny flower between its pages, a moon blossom that shimmered faintly in the dark. There were no grand announcements, no parades of professors uncovering secrets, only understanding and a hush. Hermione reached forward and carefully closed the book. The runes on the cover pulsed once with gentle light, acknowledging her, not as a master of magic, but as a keeper of stories, of memories, of forgotten things. She ran her fingers across the spine and whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "Thank you for trusting me." The chair creaked softly as she stood, and her footsteps echoed faintly through the empty aisles. She didn't need to return the book to a shelf. It belonged here now, visible only to those who sought not power, but understanding. As she stepped out of the library, the corridor greeted her like an old friend. The paintings on the walls smiled softly, some nodding without words. Even the suits of armor seemed to exhale, their stillness relaxed, as if something heavy had been lifted from the stones of the castle itself. The day had grown warmer. Outside, the lawn shimmered with the first signs of spring, petals unfurling, green returning to the edges of the grounds. Hermione walked slowly through the castle halls, past rooms that had seen centuries of laughter and loss, magic and mayhem. And yet, now, in this moment, they were just peaceful, as if Hogwarts had fallen into a deep, contented sleep. And maybe, just maybe, so had its ghosts. By the time she reached her quarters, the sky was painted in delicate streaks of lavender and rose. She lit a single candle by the window, casting a soft glow across the room. Her bed looked unusually inviting, and for once, she felt no reason to stay awake with books and scrolls. She climbed beneath the covers, the sheets cool and familiar, the air tinged with lavender. Outside, an owl hooted once and then fell silent. Inside, the candle flickered once and went out. And in the heart of Hogwarts, a book remained quietly open, ready, always, for the next forgotten voice to be remembered. And now, dear listener, as the castle settles into its quietest hour, and the last candlelight flickers softly behind stained glass windows, let us drift gently away from the story and into the stillness it leaves behind. Hogwarts, that timeless sanctuary of secrets and stars, rests once more in balance. The hidden corners are no longer shadowed with worry, but warmed with knowing. The forgotten stories have been gently returned to the light, not to be shouted from the rooftops, but simply to be remembered. And isn't that, in the end, what magic truly is? Not always the dazzling sparks or grand spells, but the quiet recognition of something sacred, something kind, that might otherwise be lost to time. A memory rediscovered, a book long ignored, opened with care. A moment where curiosity meets compassion and something old breathes again. Hermione's secret library may remain unknown to most. The memory book may close its pages again for years or even centuries, but tonight you've walked its silent halls. You've stood by her side as she listened, learned, and honored what was nearly forgotten. That magic, soft, silent, and real, is now yours too. So as your eyes grow heavy and your breath deepens, know that you are safe. That stories, like dreams, are never truly gone. They live in the hush between heartbeats, in the warmth of the beds we return to, in the peaceful turning of the world. Perhaps, as you sleep, you'll wander back through those library doors, quietly, gently, and find one more story waiting, its spine creaking open just for you. And when you do, may it whisper only comfort, only wonder, only rest. Good night, dear dreamer. You are home, you are safe, and the castle remembers you.